too. All right, we are live here down in Helena, Montana at Capital Sports. Thank you, Capital Sports, for letting us hold this here. We just finished a archery intro course. That was horrible. Intro, that was a course. And it was with 6 women who hadn't really shot much before, and so it was very fun and very inspiring to see that happen. So what we're doing now is a Q&A with women who have either been hunting or been in the industry for a while to open up questions to either new hunters, people that have been hunting, people that don't hunt. Please feel free to ask any of the questions. And start telling us where you're from. So those Facebook Live people, we have a live audience here, but the Facebook Live people, please check in. Let us know where you're from. I want to hear what states, what countries, however many people you have watching. I want to say first, before we start this, a big thank you to some of our sponsors, Capital Sports being where we're holding this here, Alaska Guide Creations, First Light, Kenetrek Boots, Montana Bow Hunters Association, Montana Wildlife Federation, Prois, Sportsman's Warehouse, and Vortex. Thank you. We've had giveaways that are going and have already started. We've had a lot of awesome gear that was donated to these first-time hunters that we were teaching earlier today. So thank you majorly for all of that, and we know that we wouldn't be here without you. I am Jessi. I am the Artemis coordinator. Artemis is an arm of the National Wildlife Federation. We are a women's hunting and angling coalition, and we are built around the idea of bringing more women into leadership positions in conservation. Conservation groups, we love them dearly, they do awesome work, tend to market to men first. So this is an ability to ask the woman to step in, be the number one, not the plus one, and have a voice. So I want to introduce who I am with here, and we'll start with Amanda.
I'm Amanda Morgan. I grew up west of Missoula. I don't know if anyone knows it. It's Alberton. It's very small. I've been hunting probably since before I graduated high school, mostly rifle hunting. I just got into archery hunting when I moved to Helena about 5 years ago, and I've been super heavy into it. I teach for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks as a bow hunter safety instructor. I'm very passionate about it. I'm very passionate about hunter safety in general, and making sure the rules are followed the first time, and making sure everyone around me, Ed, you know what I'm talking about. I teach with Ed on bow hunter safety, so him and I are pretty level as far as our passions and doing it right and having fun while doing it. That's really important too.
And I'm Jessi, I'm with Artemis, and I started hunting maybe 6-7 years ago. I picked up a bow and it just fit. It was something I got very passionate about, and I started realizing as I got into hunting that you're coming from behind if you're a woman. It's hard to find gear, it's hard to find people who will work with you and teach you. I was very lucky, I had a great mentor, but I also recognize that it's much harder for women to initially get into hunting. And it was something I became very passionate about, as well as the conservation ethic. I grew up with parents that were very active in conservation, and it was something that was a natural fit for me. So I'm a very strong believer in that there's no privilege without obligation. So if we are using these resources, if we're out there and we are partaking of our public lands and our wildlife, we have an obligation to protect them. So I started working with Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I volunteer with backcountry hunters and anglers, and it has formed into this passion that Artemis grew out of, and Artemis is sort of the new direction for women hunting and angling.
My name is Michelle Jorgensen. I'm pretty new to hunting, actually, and I've kind of gotten into it in a roundabout way. My first passion was public lands, growing up just running around in western Montana. That led to picking up a fishing rod and really just starting to really appreciate nature and our wildlife resources. And then I decided to go study for a degree in conservation. So I started working for Idaho State Parks, worked for the Wyoming Wilderness Association. I've done a lot of public lands advocacy work, and recently decided to move up to Montana and started working for a hunting docu-series called Meat Eater with Stephen Ranella. And that's been an amazing introduction to hunting. I'd done a little bit of upland hunting with shotgun and dog, loved that, but I've been on a couple of big game hunts, but I've not been fortunate enough yet to harvest, so I'm hoping to do that this year. So pretty new to big game hunting, but absolutely just enthralled by it.
I'm Mary Stang. I did not grow up in a hunting context at all. I grew up in Rutherford, New Jersey. Most people say, oh, is that near East Rutherford, where Giant Stadium is? Yes, East Rutherford was literally the other side of the tracks. But it's practically right across the river from New York City. And I grew up thinking that a good day's hunting was what you accomplished at Lord & Taylor on Fifth Avenue. And I went to undergraduate and graduate school. I became a college professor. And along the way, I met and fell in love with and married a lifelong hunter. And as a lot of women have similar stories, right? I knew that if there were going to be guns in the house, I at least needed to know how to be around them. I discovered when I started doing some rifle shooting that I was pretty much natural with a rifle, which is great. I'm still, after 30-odd years, playing catch-up with shotgunning. But I saw that there was something really significant about the relationship between the game meat that he brought home and what I've been growing in my vegetable and herb gardens for years. I like having a personal relationship with my food, you know. And hunting worked. At first, my husband Doug said, oh, Mary, you don't want to go hunting. You're the satin sheets type. Well, you know, I spent a lot of frozen nights in the back of a pickup truck and stuff, and sort of earned my hunting cred. At the same time, as I said, I'm in college. Recently, I'm now a recovering academic. I retired last year, but for the last quarter century, I was directing the Women's Studies program at Skidmore College, which is in upstate New York, and I was in the field of women's studies at a time when two things were happening. On the one hand, I discovered I was part of a movement because women were really beginning to be noticed in the hunting world. Between 1987 and 1993, the number of women hunters doubled. Now, that wasn't much, but it was a significant blip on the screen, and it has continued. Women are the ones who are keeping hunting alive these days. But anyway, that was happening. This is in the late 1980s, the early 1990s, and at the same time, in feminist studies and women's studies, they were talking about something that was coming to be called ecofeminism, the relationship between environmental studies and women's studies. And nobody was talking about hunting, so somebody had to. So I started studying it, writing about it. It was a great, I was telling just this afternoon, it was a great research area because I got Skidmore College to pay for me to do field research. This meant going hunting, going to becoming an outdoorswoman workshops in several states. You know, it was a cool gig. But anyway, I'm the authority on women and hunting these days. But I'm also very committed to the relationship between women's hunting and sustainability, which is something that really drew me to Artemis, and so I'm thrilled to be here.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug for her, is that she has a book out called Woman the Hunter, and you ought to get it. It is incredible. I read it, and I sat down, I read it in 2 days. It was like one of those where like my roommate came home and she's like, you're still on the couch? I was like, yeah, I got to get through this. This is incredible. But it talks about Artemis, which, you know, I chose this name for this coalition that we're running with National Wildlife Federation. And it came about very organically, one, because I'm very sick of acronyms. I wanted a word that didn't turn into anything else. And Artemis is the Greek goddess of wildlife, hunting, childbirth, death. She has this very yin and yang kind of feel to her. And the minute I chose that name, this sort of power happened around this group where we have some incredible women that have plugged into it. Our 10 co-founders are just these like rock solid, awesome outdoors women that are a voice in conservation, and I think it's something that we're really wanting to push out. So those of you here and those of you live and listening in on us, check it out. It is Artemis at NWF or artemis.nwf.org. Right, there we go. .org. And
It's worth pointing out that the National Wildlife Federation, to their enormous credit, is the first organization to put some money behind the support of women's hunting. I mean, that's a significant thing.
And it's more than just a group. You know, we rolled out our first action. We went to D.C. and we sat down with senators and congressmen and started talking public lands. And it was one of those things where it was like, we're not just a social media group. We're a group that's boots on the ground. So we want women in all different states to engage and plug in. We can't do this without all of you, and we need your voices in leadership positions, because this women in hunting isn't going to change without women who are hunting and talking about it. And you have to be out there and be a leader. We're a new voice in conservation. We're a voice that's listened to, and we're a different voice in the sense of it's not one people have heard often. So we can really hit that niche right now and get something done. I want to open this up. You know, you have women who have been hunting a lifetime, women who are getting into hunting, and women who have been hunting. I know you've been hunting a lifetime too. I think I'm the middle ground. But ask some questions. Please reach out and see. You know, we've got a lot of, I think, knowledge here on that. Whether it's conservation, hunting, bow hunting, rifle, whatever it is. Please ask away, and I'll open it up to the crowd. And if you do talk loud. And don't be shy, because I'll fill in the gaps.
What's your number one lessons learned about one of your first hunting experiences?
I'm going to start at then.
It wasn't my first hunting experience. Always leave your release on your bow when you're done. Yeah, I've gone out in the field with just my bow, no release.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so husband got to be the one to take the first shot, obviously, because I can't. So always put that release back.
Yeah, I'll go. We kind of covered this today in the archery clinic when you were saying never be afraid when you're at full draw. Never be afraid to what is it called? Let go or let down? To let down. Well, I can say from experience, at least with rifle hunting, you know, I've had an elk in my crosshairs, and I've said, you know, I'm not confident with the factors going on, whether that's first of all, this wasn't my own rifle, it was someone else's rifle. I wasn't confident in the rifle. I wasn't confident in the wind, the environment. I didn't trust that the elk was not going to move. So I had a lot of kind of peer pressure around me to take that shot. But I was really, I'm fortunate, or I'm grateful for that experience, knowing to back off and not take that shot. So I guess I would say that's my biggest lesson that I've learned, and I would say, you know, if I could share any advice, it would be don't ever feel that pressure, and don't do something you're not completely committed to in a hunting situation.
It's okay to
Totally.
say no to the shot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you're not comfortable, you could take the shot and wound. And I think that's the worst guilt that you can live with for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not comfortable, don't do it. And don't let whoever you're with, male or female, hey, not comfortable, sorry.
Yeah, don't let that
Tomorrow.
sway.
Yeah.
Mary.
One of the first lessons I learned when I was first learning how to shoot a rifle was the first time I had ever fired from the prone position, and I learned you got to really hold on to your gun when you pull the trigger. I've got a scope light above my eye to prove it. And it's funny, my husband's with me, and he said, "Wow, I've heard that. I've never seen that happen." I've got blood pouring down through my fingers. Yeah. Hold on to your rifle.
I think mine would be no hunt is going to be this perfect. What they don't show you in the films is when everything kind of breaks down. And one of my first hunts out, I'd drawn an elk tag in Wyoming, and it was a pretty good elk tag, and it was the first time I was out bow hunting, so it was like sort of a high stress situation on myself already. And we'd been out hunting probably 4 or 5 days, up early. I mean, when you're elk hunting and you're bow hunting, we were up at 3 a.m. and out like past 11. And so it was like low sleep, lots of miles put on. And I had relatively new gear because I was a new hunter, and I had a pack that squeaked when I walked. And you can imagine, I was so tired, and I had just had it. We hadn't seen elk that day. You just wake up sometimes, and you're just not in a good mood. And I was like trying to pull myself in, like, no, be serious, this is a hunt, like, it's gotta be epic all the time. And I was making myself more and more stressed out and grumpy, and I'm like walking up the hill and it's this like, wee, wee. I was like already just like in meltdown mode, and like pulled the pack off and just like slammed it on the ground and like was trying to get the squeak out of the pack. And just like, and my hunting partner was like turning around like, oh my God, what's happening to her? And it's just been, it's like lived on as this like, we call it the burnt mountain meltdown, because it was just like, I'm done, like this is it, I'm done. And you know, I went home and we like saw a couple grouse go, and we came up this hill and there were some cow elk that were feeding along, and it was one of those moments where like I had to remember that I was out there hunting, but what I was out there in this landscape that was just incredible, and I had to like have this meltdown. I mean, it's okay, you can have a meltdown, and pull myself back together and keep going up the hill, you know, squeaking all the way. It still squeaks. That pack's 6 years old, and I don't wear it anymore because I can't stand it. But it was one of those moments where you realize it's not always going to go as planned. And to just accept that. I mean, you're out in this incredible country with this wildlife and animals like that, and I just, like, it won't always go as planned. Enjoy it anyways. I think that's been the biggest thing I learned. And it's a great story to tell because I really lost it. Is there any other questions out there?
Yeah, do you practice with your backpack on?
I practice with a backpack sometimes. More often, I practice with a binocular harness because when I'm an archery only hunter, and that has affected my shot more than I felt like having weight on my back did. I do suggest if you are getting into archery or you're an archery hunter, at least a couple times put all your gear on and make sure that you don't hook up hats.
Hats included.
I've forgotten to take a hat off before, and it changes my anchor point, and it's one of those times where I let down because I didn't feel comfortable and I could have shot a really nice elk. And so yeah, I would say practice with the gear you're going to hunt in, and you know, there are times when you're just working on form where you don't want to have it on, but yeah, I do. It's worth it, especially when the hats are the big one.
Hats. I wear
Sunglasses,
hats,
too.
and I forget to, when I'm practicing, I practice with hats on because I wear hats when I shoot. So it's nice to have that, what you're going to be shooting in.
That's a good, yeah. Do you guys have any, how do you do with rifle hunting? Do you go full gear and when you're sighting in and everything? And
No.
yeah, it's different with archery, but
Yeah.
But a footnote to the scope bite, Doug did go to the target and said, hey, you hit the bullseye.
That's all.
like,
Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth
you
it.
got the scar to prove it.
Yes. And I have a scar to prove it.
Those are always the ones you love. Is there any questions out there? Just yell them out if you can.
So on the other side, what's your most memorable memory to date?
Actually, mine has been a season where I didn't kill anything, and I came out empty-handed. And we'd been hunting pretty hard, and I'd had a couple opportunities where I just didn't feel quite comfortable with the shot. And we had a 6x6 herd bull with about 30 cows in the meadow ahead of us, and we were on the end of this little peninsula of trees, and I was like right on the end, you know, ready to take the shot, and had a little 5-point. So mind you, we have like a giant 6-point out in the meadow that's maybe 40, 50 yards, but not providing a shot. And we have this little squeaker of a 5-point walk in, right in range, and I had that moment where I was like, do I shoot for meat and I didn't take the shot, and I'm not entirely sure why. I don't think it was size, it was more just like, I was more interested in what was going on out in the meadow. And this bull was like rutting hard. He was screaming and rounding up his cows, and we were like interrupting his bugles. He was pissed. And this 6x broken had the very unfortunate coincidence of coming out of these trees with a cow ahead of him. So it had like, he'd stolen a cow from this very pissed off bull in the middle of the thing. And this elk had been so riled up, and he like turned and he saw that 6x broken come out, and you just like saw his like nostrils flare, and like he was like, oh, you've got it, you know. And he went after it and like hit this 6x broken broadside and just dug the bull into the ground. I mean, just full on. It was like a car crash. where the kind of power of this elk hitting it. And it was one of these like moments where you're like, oh my God, why am I not a filmer? Like, why don't I have like a video? And I just sat there like shocked, and this 6x broken like is starting to get his feet underneath him and stands up and looks, goes, where's the closest cover? And it's this fingerling of trees where I'm standing right on the front, and he just runs like dead at it. And I'm not ashamed to say, I like did this little scream and jumped behind the tree like, oh gosh. And he then kind of did this displaced feeding, like, no, I totally meant to do that. This is okay. And he just like kind of stayed. The shooting light was too low to take a shot at that point, but it was one of those where I was shaking just head to toe. It was one of the most incredible experiences. And I came out of that season going, that was one of the best hunting seasons I've ever been in, and I didn't come out with meat. Like, it was incredible. That was my most memorable one. How about Zephyr?
Jeez, I have a lot. Well, it was probably this spring. Wasn't big game hunting. It was my first hunt since I've had my baby last year. I didn't hunt at all. So I was pregnant throughout hunting season. And it was awful. It was awful. Yeah, horrible timing, but she's my biggest blessing of my entire life. So turkey hunting this spring was my first time I got to go out, and I went out by myself. Usually I would go with my husband, only because who else are you going to go with usually? I mean, anyway, so he got to stay behind with the baby, and I got to go out. I called out for my first turkey. I heard one way, way, way far away, too far away. And, you know, you get discouraged, and it's like, well, I don't think he's really going to come in. Montana turkeys, mind you, are nothing like the turkeys you see on TV. They do not come in. They are not in the same tree every day. I'm here to tell you they're really hard to hunt. So I hear him that far away, and I get a little discouraged. And now I make my way back to my truck because I was road hunting. These turkeys are super easy to hunt once you get to know them. Anyway, so I heard him, jumped out, called him. He went away. Went back to the truck, gathered myself because I had left everything there but the call and my shotgun. I didn't even have a jacket on. It was super cold. So I drove up the road just maybe, I don't know, half mile. Stopped, turned my truck off, and I sat there and I could hear another one. So again, I gathered my stuff, went back out, called him, and he went away again. So I was like, well, if I don't actually try really hard, I'm going to be really bummed. So I tried again, and I could hear that same one from a really long ways away, and he was a lot closer. I'm like, oh wow, he's hauling ass. So I called again, and mind you, I am not a good turkey caller. I'm scratching, and this is the worst hen calling I've ever heard. But he was liking it. He was really liking it.
It's like, this one's easy. She doesn't know much.
So I can hear him coming. He's coming closer and closer, and I'm making the softest hen calls, and I can see him, and I can see where he's going to be at. And Marcus, sorry, you're him right now. And so I see him coming, and I set up, got my shotgun right where I see his head just come right above the bushes. And mind you, I go from archery to rifle to shotgun, so my point of impact changes. The first time I put a bead on a turkey, I was in archery mode, and I had bushes in front. I didn't think, oh, those shotgun beads are going to actually get him. So I've passed on a lot of turkeys with my shotgun because I'm in that archery mode. Anyway, no archery mode, shot at him, got him, and it was super awesome. He wasn't even gone yet, and I had my husband on the phone. I did it! I got it! I did it! And what was great is that he had gotten a Jake, which is a smaller turkey, if none of you know. And I got a very mature bird, which was very, very rewarding. Unfortunately for him, it doesn't reflect well on him, but for me it was really rewarding to come home with a very, very mature tom. So
It is an awesome story.
solo, it lasted maybe 2.5 hours. And
That's incredible.
That's my one and only. Of all the times we've gone out, we busted our butts in that same area for many, many turkeys, and That was my turkey season.
I don't know about you. I get the same amp up with a turkey coming in as I do with an elk. It doesn't matter.
No,
It's
it
like,
gives
it's
me
the same, like,
goosebumps.
ah,
Oh no, just the
they're coming.
the gobble. It's addictive.
Yeah. How about you for your mixed one?
It's kind of almost a lesson learned too. It was that same hunt I was referencing earlier. Being out, I was out for whitetail and elk, and I learned the lesson of always have every tag you can possibly have, because out, I'm exploring this incredible country. I'm with a friend. We're having a blast, and I'm just like, oh gosh, there's mule deer. Look at those nice mule deer, and then here comes a black bear on this ridge. So just seeing all this incredible wildlife in this one location where you're like, wow, this is an incredibly rich area, because it's like this transitional zone, like it's coming off the mountains in the foothills down into this riparian area, and then being able to just have those encounters with those animals. And then also we were trying to figure out, we saw this black spot like far away, and we're like, what's that? We're glassing that up, and we're like, that's gotta be a wolf. That's gotta be a wolf. And we're sitting there watching it for like 15 minutes, slowly coming in, and lo and behold, it's just a trophy skunk. So have all your tags.
What's the deadline for applying for skunk?
What's that? Is that just varmint? Can you use that open season?
I had a friend that had a spotting scope turned up too much, and he was glassing the hills, and he goes, and mind you, we're in the bighorns, by the way, that don't have grizzly bears there. And he's got the spotting scope up, and he goes, whoa, grizzly! And the two of us saw him like, what? Like, no. And he's like, oh wait, oh no, that's a marmot. Like, it was just like, he'd had the spotting scope up so far. It was just like, when it stopped, everybody called, we were like, what? Because he's somebody like knows
Came over
grizzly.
Well, you see what you want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you hunt, we hunt our ranch. We have a bison ranch in southeastern Montana, and we've been hunting the same land. It's really nice to have that kind of relationship with the place that you hunt. But there are certain things that every year, deer season's going to start. I'm going to glass the same thing that I've glassed every season several times, because I know it's a tree, or I know it's just a funny shadow, but it looks like a deer every time.
Those are the ones you're like, oh, wait, no, stump. Whoops.
And it's the same stump it was last year.
Exactly. What's your most memorable hunting? Do you have one?
I've been hunting for over 30 years, and there are lots. And I think about some really special times. One time when it was my first nice whitetail. I'm primarily a deer hunter. But it was the first really nice whitetail I shot. And he died so gracefully because he sort of did a pirouette. It was a very good hit. And he just swirled up and then, and that's what you want to see. But it was beautiful. I doubled on mule deer does once. Shot two with one. And I had two tags.
Was that intentional?
No, I didn't. I did not know that the second one was standing behind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Perfectly in sync. Yeah.
Very lucky.
And I've had some marvelous. Experiences of really successful hunts that I felt very good about. Some hunts that I didn't feel so good about. But what I really like best is when I am thinking like the deer and anticipating, like I see a group of deer and I can anticipate where they're going to go and stalk them, and they turn out to be where I thought they were going to go.
I can relate to that feeling. Anymore, I'm a big angler, so anymore it's like not even so much about catching the fish and landing the fish. For me, I love that satisfaction I get from reading the water, like reading every environmental factor that comes in with a cast, putting it where it is, and that fish just coming up and eating it. I don't even care if I land it. I just want that satisfaction of knowing, right? Yeah, it's incredibly, my fishing has evolved to that level where I don't even want to touch the fish anymore.
I think when you hit that point where you're, I think I have 2 points. There's when you've put yourself into the ecology of the place, when you fit in and you become sort of part of the food chain and you are predator, you start looking at landscapes differently and you look at animals differently, and it's not with any less care, it's with a kinship. And I think when you know, now I don't go on a hike where I don't notice mule deer prints and antelope prints and the forage they've been eating, and maybe this brush has been eaten down more than this brush, and why is that? Why do they like that more? And you fit yourself more into the ecology of a place when you start hunting. And it's not to say that non-hunters don't have that, but it's to say that most people that are hunting pay attention to smaller things around the landscape and around themselves. And you start recognizing the impact that you yourself have. So you don't take a misstep that snaps a stick and you watch your trophy buck disappear over the skyline. You start watching where you put your feet. You start watching, where your scent is, what you smell like, what the wind is like, what the horizon looks like, where you are on the horizon, because don't skyline yourselves. Those mule deer know. And it's, you fit yourself more into that place. And I think that's something that as hunting, we don't talk about enough. Hunting has been, I think, woefully misrepresented in media and by other hunters, in the sense of that they think they're speaking to other hunters only. And while you may understand what they're talking about when they have a grip and grin, and you understand the work and the sweat and the blood and the tears and everything that goes behind somebody holding a dead animal smiling, what you don't get is that no longer does this only reach hunters, this reaches everyone. And so being tasteful and realizing that you are talking to mostly non-hunters that are seeing this, each hunter, I don't care who you are, is an ambassador for who we are and what our livelihood is now. And to make sure that you are tasteful in your representation of that, talking about, what your hunt meant to you is much better than, you just have to be careful. Social media is that way now. I mean, you're all on live and you're seeing everything. How many people can watch in this that aren't hunters? You have to realize that you're talking to a lot of non-hunters here. And I think women's voices in that are an ability to bridge this. To be able to talk more on the emotions is an inherently female trait. Not that males can't, it's just a little more likely that a female will. And talking through the emotions and talking through, the meltdowns and the triumphs and things like that is important in the whole story of the hunt. It can't just be the grip and grin. And I think that's a culture that needs to change if people are to understand what we cherish in a hunt and in angling. I mean, I think people have to understand what goes behind it. Somebody that gets that joy and doesn't even have to touch the fish. It's the same person that comes out of a full hunting season with no meat and still feels successful. It's learning the animals, it's learning the landscape, and that's what we need to change this sort of definition to. That's one. And then my second one is to Mary's point, talking about hitting an animal, and you didn't know there was another animal behind it. And I've worked with many wonderful Wyoming Game and Fish personnel, and I'm sure the Fish and Game here would say the same thing. If you make a mistake, and it will probably happen, it may not be that you shoot another animal, it just may be that you if you mess up in any way, the best course is honesty. They are going to be so much more lenient with you if you just call the warden up and say, listen, I didn't realize there was another doe behind it and I only have one doe tag, or I didn't realize there was a buck behind it, or I didn't realize, that honesty goes so much further than anything else. I've seen them crack down on people that weren't honest, and you do not want to do it. That honesty is important, and it's something I would just stress to every hunter out there is, mistakes happen. Sometimes you wound an animal and you don't kill it. It's sucks, and we spend our whole year practicing going up to that so we don't have that happen, but it will probably happen. And you just have to realize how the only control we have over is how we deal with it. And I think that's a very important thing. And I just wanted to that. You're lucky you had 2 tags. That's awesome. That's the best case scenario in that.
To kind of backtrack a little bit, if you can think about it this way, the same amount of hunters that we have that are very passionate, there's the same amount of anti-hunters who do not like hunting,
There's a lot
If
more.
not more.
There's a lot more.
who loathe what we do. That's a small percentage. There's maybe, what's the percent, Ed? Do you remember? Non-hunters?
Not that are antis?
86.
86.
We're like 14% of the population.
Yeah.
But non-hunters are not necessarily anti-hunters.
No, they don't care either way. They prefer to maybe not see that big old bloody picture of you with your cow elk and her tongues hanging out. That's where they turn into the anti. That's where they turn that way. The distaste in pictures is mostly, especially on Facebook, on bragging boards, keeping it tasteful.
Yeah, actually, Mark Duda, who is like the numbers cruncher when it comes to the demographics of hunting, he has released some very interesting survey data in the last few years that suggests that the really not the vast majority of Americans, male and female, approve strongly, or at least approve of legally regulated hunting. They don't have trouble with the idea of hunting, but as some of you know, the correlative to that is the fact that the same people who say they're fine with hunting have a problem with hunters. And that brings it back down to hunter behavior.
Yeah, it brings it back to the individual and also like us trying to perpetuate a better, more responsible culture.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and it kind of gets into the idea of having a really great opportunity for hunter recruitment. If however X% are not necessarily staunch anti-hunters, like our behavior reaching out to our community, whether that's social media or at church or your friends and your family, and even a greater like beyond that. That's an incredible opportunity for hunter recruitment. Bringing folks into, maybe they're apathetic, they don't have an opinion on hunting, showing them and telling them through your passion and a story about your experiences and the value that they bring to your life. I think that's an incredible opportunity for us as hunters and anglers, because that goes directly back to the idea of resource conservation and landscape scale conservation. So we need to be, we need to just be increasing those opportunities, absolutely. And if we can do that through hunting, I see that as an amazing opportunity.
And something, from and I know we've talked about this with Artemis a lot, is that those personal stories are so valuable. When you are writing your congressman or your senator and you say, you have a personal story of like, this happened on this patch of land, as a citizen, I'm paid. I work for Artemis. I work for Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I can go and lobby and talk and be like, here's what we want, here's what we do. But the voice of the unattached citizen is so powerful. To write in and don't like the canned letters, use that as talking points. Look at the points that they have in there and be like, okay, here's like the point of like what will happen if we close down this bit of land, or what will happen if we get rid of this species, or whatever it is. Use those talking points, but write your own letter and make it personal. If you have experiences, write it down. It is incredible. Legislators will tell us over and over and over again, like, that's great, it's a canned letter, sure you have like 8,000 signatures, but why do I care? And it's when you take the time out of your day to write your personal experience. So taking that not only to the general public, but taking it to the people who are representing you. And whether it's state legislature or it's your delegates at the national level, that's how we change things, is the citizen personal voice. And this, like I said, use the canned letters. Take those talking points from them, because you want to have points that are there, but please incorporate your story in it, because it's so much more powerful that way.
And do it in the first paragraph, because otherwise
Yep.
they just see the canned letter.
Yeah, it just happened the other day with the Savinoso Wilderness getting the first access in 30 years. And it was because of the personal voice, like your voice, your voice, your voice. And now anybody can go and access this land that's been completely locked out by just checkerboarding.
Yeah.
So it's
incredible.
It can occasionally happen. Like, you might not get a win every time, but it does count.
And as a hunter, when you're looking at large-scale conservation work, especially this public lands fight, what happens in other states affects what Montana, Wyoming, any state is going to do.
Yeah, it's a litmus test.
It's a litmus test.
They'll
So
start
if
somewhere that might
Wyoming
be a
gets
little
something
easier.
through, Montana goes, oh, well, Wyoming did it. Like, clearly they have support there. And it just is this slippery slope.
Yep.
So, weigh in, absolutely weigh in on your state, weigh in at national, weigh in on, if you hunt other places, weigh in there. It counts, and it's somebody that wants to know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Conservation-wise. As Artemis, I know that if you sign up for or subscribe for our letters, we will have national updates that will come about things that are closing, things that are opening, things you need to know about. Right now, I mean, the big things, the hot things is that Seven Oso Wilderness, the sage grouse, the sage grouse conservation plans, that's a big one. It's been
The monuments review.
The monuments review, yep. And there's a great bill in Congress right now that's actually really pro-sportsman. It's called the Help for Wildlife Bill. And it's been the best looking sportsman bill we've seen in a long time. And, it has a couple things in there where you're like, well, that's not great, but on the whole, it's largely good. And so there's times where you can weigh in that's positive too. You don't always just have to be like, against everything.
Yeah, it's good to throw them a bone every once in a while. And when something does pass, like Sabino, so write your delegates and say thank you. Like, how many thank yous do you think they get? Probably not a lot.
Especially now.
Yeah, so say thanks when you do get what you want.
And that's the thing is don't alienate yourself from them. Along those lines is you may not agree with them on a choice they made here, but you may agree with them on something really great they do later. So call them out respectfully, but don't burn that bridge. You don't want to just torch them, because then they're going to be like, why am I working for you? So you want to make sure, hold them accountable, but do it respectfully.
Mm-hmm. And it's I know that sometimes it seems like everything's happening all at once, and it can be a little overwhelming, and a lot of folks don't want to engage in these public lands issues. Mm-hmm. But if you are a hunter or an angler or a hiker, whatever you do on public lands, these things do affect you, so just trying to keep that in mind as a hunter and an angler.
It's 640 million acres in the U.S. That's a lot of land that is up and in the air.
Yeah. I don't engage in a lot politically, but the public lands and conservation issues, it's that's where I'm going to invest my energy.
Yep.
So, do whatever makes you're passionate about.
I have a question for you, and I want to hear, it's been something that I've thought about, and I don't have kids, and I want to know, how, as a hunter, are you going to introduce your kid into this world? How do you think just bringing them out or being around it or talking about it, or I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, just like any other child that you bring into this world, you try and get them involved in what they want to do. It's something that I'm not going to shove down her throat. That's not going to be my point. But I want to make her interested. I want her to want to like it. I don't, some kids, especially this day and age, it's hard to say what they're going to like. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to make her like something that she may or may not like. Mm-hmm. If she wants to do football all fall, that's fine. I'll sit in the stands and watch you every single time you play. But I mean, I want to talk to her about it and be positive about it. And with Facebook and media being so you see more negative than good, it seems like. A lot of people really don't like it, and that's what I see a lot. And it's hard to show Facebook and be engaged in that kind of stuff because everyone's just so mean about it. And for a child, it's hard to say. I mean, it's just going to be, she goes out with us already. She was on her first deer hunt when she was almost 2 months old. So she was very little. It wasn't anything extravagant. She was just in her car seat. We were in the truck, and her dad got his deer this last fall. So she was there. I mean, she's been involved in a lot of hunting. She actually went hunting with him the other day, antelope hunting. Awesome. She had the babysitter in their truck, and he was out.
That's awesome. Yeah, my friend
I want that babysitting job. I'll babysit, but I'm going hunting with you, actually.
My friend said the other day about his little daughter, Eleanor, he was like, I'm just going to include her in every part of our life. There's nothing that we don't want her to experience, We like to archery hunt, we like to do this, we like to do that, we raft. And she's just along for the ride, and I feel like it'll be interesting to see them develop their own personalities, right? And make those choices themselves. Yeah. But I think it makes a lot of sense that perhaps she'll gravitate to what is the norm for your family.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Right?
And every kid does. My parents, they're more into cars. I understand cars a lot better than I understand hunting sometimes. It's ever changing, both industries. But I gravitate more towards something else, but it's something that they've dabbled in, but not heavily like I do now. So,
But you can't necessarily, yeah.
Y'all are talking about, your family and your hunting and you got the kids, so they've got that exposure, they've got that experience. What about someone who is completely outside that? My family's never hunted, I've never had that exposure, never had that experience. I'm trying to come into it completely as an outsider, as an adult. What, advice would you give to someone who hasn't done it before? I don't even know Montana, this is 2,500 miles from, where I know.
yeah.
I don't have gear, I'm starting from scratch.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
I can speak to
Get
that.
involved.
I can speak to that because I'm so new at all of that, Like I said, I just grew up with a rod in my hand. All I knew was fishing, and all the men in my family hunted, but I was never invited. So how do I get into that now at 33 years old? I would say mentorship is huge. We covered that today in the archery clinic. If you can find a friend, I know it's hard, being new here, and I just moved here too to Montana, so I've left every public land access I know, every honey hole, everything that I could count on is just gone. And I've been lucky to meet amazing people. So through organizations in your community, if you just happen to be lucky to run into somebody, just be open and just want it, I think, and just try to make those connections with folks and organizations. The gear thing, I know gear's so big out nowadays, right? Gear's so big. It's like you gotta have the best, and you can fall into that trap. But one of the best hunters I know, he grew up hunting in handmade wool clothing that his mom made him. You can hunt in jeans. You can do whatever. Don't buy into that hype if you don't.
Gear adds ease and comfort.
It does.
Yeah.
But I'm with you where you go, get out. Don't wait to have the gear.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and experience it and stay passionate with that, and the gear will come.
There's a couple places, if you're local here in Helena, there's a couple right here, the store we're sitting in. That guy right there in that tan shirt is probably one of the most experienced gear guys I personally know. So just go into your local sports store. I mean, a lot of the people there aren't there to sell you stuff. They want to make sure you walk away with the stuff that you need and want to use and will use.
Well, that can be kind of intimidating for
Yeah.
women, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But on the family thing, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
My husband's son really didn't take to hunting. And we joked. I used to say I'm the son he never had. But you can't guarantee that the family is going to be the fertile ground for that.
And I would caveat that, when you're looking for people and mentors, reach out places like Montana Wildlife Federation and the Bow Hunters Association, Montana Bow Hunters Association, and Artemis is going to be working towards this as well. Reaching out to organizations that are sportsman based to make connection, and you not only get the connection of other hunters, but you get the connection of the conservation behind it, which I would say, again, I'm that person that beats that drum, is there is no privilege without obligation. Don't be hunting without protecting it.
And there's also the Becoming an Outdoorswoman
Yeah,
program.
that one. Yeah, that one's really good too.
That's a really good place to find other women that you can affiliate with and to get some really good.
Does Montana have one? Or I know
Yes.
it started in Wisconsin, but there's one in Montana that's fantastic.
For FWP.
Cool. And I know that, I don't know if FWP here in Montana does it, but in Idaho, Idaho Fish and Game provides a mentorship service. You actually get to go out with a fish and game warden or biologist, and you will be kind of assigned with them for your first hunt. So I'm sure there's those resources, if not through Idaho, through Montana somewhere. And also the web is just an amazing resource for great educational tools. I can speak to working for the Meat Eater program. We have a blog, and you can learn literally anything you need to learn, from the gutless method versus gutting an elk, or your essential gear items that you do need to have.
He has a great book out that actually goes
oh my
through that
gosh,
as well.
Steve Ranella, he created, and my whole cohort created the complete guide to hunting, butchering, and cooking wild game. We have a big game version as well as a small game version. You can get it on Amazon for like $10, and it's just the Bible for.
It really is everything.
It's taught me so much. And then we have a YouTube page, and we're not the only resource. We're one of hundreds. So just getting out, digging in, and if you're passionate about it, you're just going to love that learning process.
There's great podcasts as well. That's another one.
Yeah.
You have like
I love Randy Newberg's
Randy
podcast.
Newberg. Yeah, he's got a great podcast.
We have
There's
the Meat Eater podcast.
The Meat Eater one, Gritty Bowman. I mean, there's like all sorts of
Backcountry
podcasts.
Hunters and Anglers has their new podcast, A Blast.
He has a great podcast. He talks with a lot of other hunters too.
Yeah.
Have you taken bow hunter or any hunter safety in Montana yet?
Nope.
That's the first thing I would do is go to hunter safety, attend a bow hunter safety class, even if you don't intend to use it. It's nice to have.
And you may
there's
meet a person there.
Tons of education within those classes, and the instructors are there to help point you in the right direction too. That's a great starting point in my opinion. Any state.
It's not just for 12-year-olds.
Nope.
No,
And they don't make you go to class as a 12-year-old.
Yep, you can do it online. They do charge for the online class, but there is the week-long classes where you can actually interact. And for those online classes, the only thing you pretty much show up, see them do a presentation, maybe shoot a couple times, and that's it. And I think that kind of takes away from the learning process. Yeah, you might be with some 12-year-olds. Oh well.
They're actually comedic relief. I had
And they're so eager.
Yeah, and we had an instructor in mine, and I was sitting right next to the 12-year-old, and the instructor's talking about like don't drink and shoot guns. And the only note this 12-year-old took was don't drink alcohol. And it was like on this big blank sheet of paper, and like the instructor was like really emphasizing it, like, don't go out and drink and hunt and in pairs, da-da-da-da. And this 12-year-old is like, like goes down to write it. And I was like, that's cool. He's taking something away. It was one of they're great, and it's really inspiring to be sitting next to a little kid and sitting next to. I mean, some people. I had a person that was 60 that was in my class, and
That's so cool.
it's way cool to kind of. You have all age groups, so don't be afraid to go in there just because you're a new adult hunter. Like,
Don't be intimidated by the kids. I know they're kind of intimidated.
Don't let them. What was Mary? With what you do, and you were teaching in New York, if I'm correct, did you run into a lot of like anti-hunter where you were the hunter talking to antis, or was it more like you were the hunter educating people that just didn't know much?
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of, on the one hand, I've had some terrific adventures with animal rights activists. And, I mean, I was prohibited from going to one of their conferences. The Friends of Animals, they sick their lawyer on me. And I was not tenured at the time, and that lawyer also contacted the dean of the faculty of Skidmore College. It got ugly. I mean, and the dean was, she could give as good as she got, but it was unpleasant. But there are also really some neat things. I had access to a certain amount of money that just sort of turned up in an account that I controlled as the Women's Studies Director, and 2 or 3 times there was a pheasant hunting operation called Pheasant Hill that was nearby in a little town in rural New York, and they would have continental pheasant shoots, and this is going from one station to another, and they would have shotgun flurries to begin with, so that you could really get ready for shooting. And 3 times, I think it was, I brought small groups of female students who were interested in shooting. And there was this wonderful guy. He was a retired shotgun instructor. He used to work for Orvis. I mean, this guy really knew shooting. And I would go out for the pheasant shoot, and my students would go with him, and he'd have them breaking clays by the time the 3 hours of the shoot were done, and everyone got back. And one of my students one day said, I was the only woman involved in the hunt that particular day, and so I was going off with my inappropriate shotgun. It was a Browning Auto 5 Light 12, which is not a light gun at all, really not a pheasant gun, but it was the one I had with me in New York. So I'm taking my big gun out, and she said, when I came back, she said, "I looked at you with all those men and said, that's my professor going." New kind of Skidmore pride. But there were, I mean, and this is something I've seen, we've talked a little bit about this. Over the years, when I first started teaching at Skidmore, and I'd be coming home for a long weekend, or taking 10 days of Thanksgiving, which got that dean I mentioned rather riled, but I did it because of deer season. But when I was coming home in the early years, in this long commute that I did, my colleagues would say, or my students would say, "Well, oh, where are you going?" I'd say, "Oh, Doug and I are going hiking. You know, we're going camping."
Censoring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Censoring
yeah.
a bit.
Well, that is.
And then, you know, now, you know, the last few years, "Oh, you're going hunting? Wow, did you get anything?" You know, and there's a much more interest among younger women, and I think younger men as well, in the relevance of hunting, especially in this day and age when they survey women about their hunting motivations as opposed to surveying men. It used to be that men and women said pretty much the same thing. Now women overwhelmingly say their number one motivation for hunting is the meat. And it's because of food safety, food security, being involved with their food, introducing their children to hunting. It's a very interesting time we're living in that regard.
We get a lot of conversation around, like anecdotally, around the idea of like the locavore movement,
Yeah.
and how that's actually a very interesting segue or like an entry point for folks to be recruited into hunting. So it's going to be neat to see how that pans out culturally, as well as like through future studies. So I definitely can feel the tide changing a bit, and it's kind of exciting. I get a lot of emails from New York saying, you know, "I'm a young professional. I want to hunt. What do I do?"
Yeah.
So we'll see how that all pans out.
Yeah, and one book that's a good resource is Tovar Siroli's The Mindful Carnivore. Yeah, and he was a vegan who became a hunter.
Wow.
He writes about it. It's a cool book.
I had a roommate that moved in with me 3-4 years ago as a vegetarian, and you know, we had wonderful discussions around why she was a vegetarian, and you know, you run into this a lot. I think this is something that as a hunter you have to get comfortable with, is talking to people that, you know, I'm a vegetarian because of cruelty to animals, or, you know, how can you call yourself a conservationist when you're a cold-blooded murderer? I have gotten that question.
I love answering that one.
I've had really good conversations about hunting with ethical vegetarians.
Oh, yeah.
The people who drive me nuts are the ones who want to talk about how disgusting hunting is, but they don't want to think about where their Big Mac came from.
Exactly, and I think
That's not a
one-
conversation worth engaging in.
Yeah, you just,
I mean, to me.
you just don't engage in, and one really effective way that I found to like sort of offset that, and it puts you sort of back in your place of comfort, is to recognize that these are people that care deeply about animals. And
As do we.
and to recognize that that is a place of commonality, and to see that and be like, listen, like, I realize you don't understand what I do, and I realize I don't understand where you're coming from, but what I am thankful for is the fact that you care about animals as deeply as I do, regardless of how we do it. And I would rather live in a world that has people like you that care about animals but don't like what I do, than living in a world with people that don't care at all. And it is so important to find that commonality, because we're only going to change this if we start building bridges. And if we continue drawing this line in the sand where it's like you're the anti-hunter and I'm the hunter and we don't talk, this is not going to help. This is not how we change the tide of our world in conservation right now. We have got to work together. If they care about our public lands but don't like hunting, find a way to work with them. Find a way to get along. Be kind, be respectful. Don't let this like initial, and they'll come, you know, they come at you vehemently. I mean, I have gotten that, like, how can you call yourself a like conservationist when you murder animals? that was like verbatim the question, and it was just kind of like, oh, whoa, okay. Be ready for that, because as a hunter, you are plugged into this dark and light side of things, and people that haven't done it don't understand what it is like to take the life of an animal and how it ties you to that animal in that landscape. Recognize that they don't understand that, and from that build respect and kindness. Do not respond. Do not rise to that at all, because that only creates the line deeper. I mean, I think that's a big thing to make sure that you do. I don't care, man, woman, child,